It's with great pleasure, not only because it's a sunny day today, but it's a great pleasure that I welcome you today to our Call to Care for Animal Welfare event, an afternoon conference dedicated to our treatment of animals. As Brussels Minister of Animal Welfare, it's my honor to have put together this event along with my counterparts, Ben Waits, Flemish Minister for Animal Welfare, and Ms. Céline Tellier, Walloon Minister for Animal Welfare. And it's always a good thing when the three Belgian regions are working together. In light of Belgium starting its presidency term of the Council of the EU at the beginning of the year, this symposium is a key event affirming our support to strive for better animal welfare regulation throughout Europe. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude to Commissioner Stella Kyriakides for taking the time to join us today, demonstrating the Commission's keen attention to animal welfare. Thank also to Ms. Claire Bury, Deputy Director General for Food Sustainability at the Commission, who will present the recent proposals on animal welfare. And I'd like to address my heartfelt thanks to all of our speakers and panelists whose presentations and discussions will, I'm sure, enlighten the audience today. According to the latest European Barometer on Animal Welfare, 48% of European citizens believe that the welfare of farmed animals should be better protected. And a better level of protection for pets is also of concern for 74% of EU citizens. Similar results can be drawn from the Brussels survey that I conducted in 2021. The sentient nature of the animals, as well as their individual interest and dignity, were acknowledged by the vast majority of respondents. As science progresses and society evolves, the sentient nature of animals has become the pivotal criteria on which their protection stands. More and more states are recognizing this. Here in Brussels, it's my intention to reform the current legislation on animal welfare to protect animals at every stage of their lives. It's within this framework that in Brussels, the notion of sentience will be recognized as such. This recognition will lead to various improvements, such as a ban on the display and sale of live animals in markets. I will also propose to introduce a specific offense for the failure to assist an animal in danger, as well as to introduce a community service hours dedicated to sanction infraction to animal welfare. These advances and others will put Brussels and Belgium at the forefront. Today, our speakers have chosen to present some of the challenges that we currently face regarding animal welfare. First, animal welfare and economic profitability, or the necessary balance to strike between the protection of farm animals and the commercial activities surrounding their breeding. We will then speak about the extreme breeding practices of cats and dogs and the trade of pets through illegal online advertisements. The challenge that we will approach during this conference are not confined to the limits of our regions or country, but are shared with all of the EU. Citizens of all horizons can be tempted to purchase or adopt pets that meet certain race standards that could be detrimental to their health and well-being. Without a proper framework, the advertisements of cats and dogs, especially in social media platforms, do not allow for wise and informed decisions on the obligations implied by taking in an animal. This can lead to negligence or abandonment. In Belgium, General rules regarding the advertising of pets have already been put in place. However, to be more effective, we need action beyond our regional and national borders. Let us draw on the expertise of our guest speakers and exchange on the good practices being carried out by our neighbors and partners. I hope that this day will not only further our collaboration in order to reduce animal suffering and achieve a better level of animal welfare. I wish you a pleasant discussion. Veel succès et une très belle après-midi.
Ministers, esteemed guests, colleagues, friends, I'm going to say good afternoon. I do not expect you all to repeat it. So good afternoon. First of all, I warmly welcome that the Belgian presidency will be focusing on animal health and animal welfare during the coming 6 months. And today's event is evidence of how much you care deeply about animal welfare, and I want to thank you for inviting me to be here with you. Last month, the Commission adopted an animal welfare package, and this includes 2 very important legislative proposals. The legislative proposal on animal transport and the legislative proposal on the welfare of dogs and cats. The proposal on animal transport represents, I believe, a major breakthrough after almost 2 decades. And thanks to the input from the European Food Safety Authority and the very extensive impact assessment, the proposal substantially improves on the standards divide in legislation, which in fact date back to 2005. In particular, it provides for shorter journey times, increased space allowances, stricter conditions for sea transport, and stricter conditions for the transport of the vulnerable animals, like young and pregnant ones. Our proposal also radically transforms enforcement thanks to the use of new technologies and direct journey data uploads in the Commission's online certification platform, Traces. The second legislative proposal is that on the welfare of dogs and cats. This is the first time ever in the EU, and it's a milestone in the history of EU animal welfare. And I want to just, if I may be permitted, take 1 second to thank all those in my DG and in my cabinet who believed in this from day one that we could actually deliver. With more than 70 million dogs and over 83 million cats owned by nearly half of all EU households, this was imperative. Under the proposal, robust animal welfare requirements will be applying to establishments housing and breeding dogs and cats. In addition, in our proposal, we have asked for strict requirements on the traceability of dogs and cats, making false identification and consequent illegal trafficking much more difficult. These new requirements are important to protect public health, animal welfare, animal health, especially as online trading in these animals accounts for around 60% of the market in them. The third animal welfare package contains a third element. The animal welfare package contains a third element: the Commission's reply to the European Citizens' Initiative for a Fur-Free Europe. We have asked for a scientific opinion to give us a robust basis on which to build our future initiative. On the subject of European citizen initiatives, I want to just tell you that I have received a number of questions on the Commission's reply to the end of cage age. I want to be absolutely clear that the Commission has not given up on its commitment. We're producing a balanced proposal that will be weighing up the costs involved, the transition periods needed, and the impact of our trading partners, and we are constantly working on this. More dialogue is required to build the necessary consensus on the way we move forward, including the most notably in the context of strategic dialogue on the future of agriculture in the EU, which President von der Leyen has already launched on 25th of January. So, dear friends, the Belgian presidency has the important task of carrying forward these two major legislative proposals on animal welfare. They can count on our full support. I'm sure that the presidency will do everything possible to make these proposals a reality. Looking ahead, the Commission will continue working on other aspects of the revision of the animal welfare legislation with the same level of commitment. We have taken major steps to improve the welfare of animals, but I think all of us present in this room can agree that more is needed. And as a Commissioner for Health and Food Safety, under whose remit is, and under my mandate, is animal welfare, I can assure you that this commitment is ongoing, but I also feel very privileged to be in a position that has allowed me to push forward with some of the revisions that we have put forward of the legislative proposals, and to know that we are all committed to a cause which is not negotiable at the level of the EU. So I want to thank you so much. This event is going to play a valuable part in pointing, in taking the right steps, in an inclusive way of keeping everyone involved so that we do reach our objectives. Better animal health and better animal welfare. Thank you, and I wish you an excellent afternoon in your deliberations. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here. I am indeed English by origin, but Belgian by chosen country. For me, this was the Brexit dividend that I became Belgian as well. So I'm going to talk about both of the legislative proposals on the protection of animals during transport and the welfare of dogs and cats. I wanted to, before I start, to underline what the Commissioner has just said as well about the other elements of the proposals, the legislative proposals, which we've been working on welfare of animals kept for farming purposes, in particular to respond to the End the Cage Age initiative. So as the Commissioner, as you said very clearly, we have not given up. In DG Santé, we do not give up, as you know, Commissioner. You've had that experience with us now. So we are still working on those. As you mentioned, Commissioner, they require more detailed study, but the work goes on, and we hope that under the next Commission, they will also see the light of day. Now, the proposals that we're going to explain to you further today respond to the fact, and I think the Minister mentioned it as well, at the beginning, that more than 80% of EU citizens want better protection of animals. So this is clearly very much the backdrop to what the Commission has decided to come forward with. So first of all, I'm going to start with transport. Both proposals have been welcomed. The pets one is extremely popular. The transport one is more complicated, so a little bit less popular. But I'm going to start with that because it's very important, I think, from an animal welfare and also, obviously, from an economic point of view. So the current legislation was adopted in 2005, and some elements around journey times and space allowances have actually been unchanged since 1995. Which was basically done on science which dated from 1992. So I think all of the scientists who are present will agree that we've moved on a bit since then, and this needed to be reflected. So EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, adopted in 2022 a series of scientific opinions indicating that the current standards needed to be changed as regard the duration, space allowances, and the temperatures under which animals are transported. Now, enforcement remains a challenge, in particular in relation to export to third countries. The rules have been supposed to apply to export for quite some time, and I'll come back to that. But this proposal is also intended to improve the issues around enforcement. And last, but by no means least, technological process, again, has given us more possibilities. A lot of the official controls are currently based on paper, the journey log, the transporter authorization, the certificate of competence, etc. Whilst the transport industry now uses very sophisticated technology for monitoring their fleet, tracking their vehicles in real time. So we need to align the legislation to the fact that digital technology now gives a lot more possibilities in terms of non-compliance and administrative burden. So first of all, the journey times. This, as I said, is one of the key pillars of the proposal. And up until now, the maximum journey times were based on the type of animals, irrespective of the destination. Now we're proposing to limit the transport of most animals who are going for slaughter to 9 hours. There will be a derogation if there is no slaughterhouse in the vicinity, and it's not available, it's not possible in the time frame, but the transport for slaughter for poultry and rabbits will be limited to 12 hours. Now this of course begs the question, what about transport for other purposes? And here, for the fattening and breeding, long journeys by road will be possible for 21 hours travelling, 24 hours rest, and then a final travelling period of 21 hours. It's what you can see on the second point there. But then no further transport would be permitted. And this is a change as compared to the existing situation. Now, why 21 hours? We've here taken into account what the legislation for drivers of vehicles says as well, so that we align it with the social legislation on drivers, so maximum 21 hours for 2 drivers without stop. Now, obviously, unweaned animals, particularly fragile, particularly vulnerable, so there the transport is limited to 8 hours in the absence of feeding, and 19 hours if feeding systems are approved, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. Under extreme temperatures, journey times will also be limited. Again, I'll talk about temperature in a moment. And important to note that transport by sea does not count as a journey time, and we can come back to that as well. So I'll move now to space allowance. Again, we've updated on the basis of the latest scientific evidence from EFSA. Currently, we have a very, very old scientific opinion. Some of the figures are incomplete and inconsistent, and some species are not fully covered, for example, pigs. And space allowance varies between road, rail, or sea. So this proposal contains a uniform set of space allowances common for all modes of transport and aligned with the scientific opinions. Now, here, the space allowances are calculated on a unique formula called an allometric equation. My daughter is doing her maths test at school today, so I was also concentrating yesterday on trying to see what this actually meant. But I think to summarize it very quickly, it's basically a unique formula that depends on the live weight of the animals and the species concerned. That's, I think, a simple way of putting it, and I'm sure those scientists present will explain in more detail if needed, and my colleagues can do that as well. So next, extreme temperatures. So as we all are aware, I think, extreme temperatures, especially high ones, can be particularly detrimental for the welfare of animals because they have limited ways of coping with very hot and cold weather, especially in limited space, if there's limited bedding and access to water and so on. So the proposal restricts the transport of animals based on the weather forecast for the entire route. So that needs to be taken into account when the journey starts to make sure that animals are not exposed to bad conditions en route when nothing can be done about it. So there needs to be a kind of thinking about what's going to happen with the weather over the time of the journey. And when the daytime weather forecast shows temperatures over 30 degrees, the transport is limited to travelling during the night. And when the nighttime weather forecast shows temperatures over 30, there should be additional space for the animals for that particular journey to help them cope with the higher temperatures. So there's more ventilation, there's more humidity, and there is access to drinking. Between 25% and 30%, the transport during daytime is limited to 9 hours. And below 5%, the transport's also limited to 9 hours. Obviously, animals can better cope with lower temperatures because they produce heat in a confined space, but below 5 degrees requires a lot of energy for animals to keep up their body temperature, and especially if they're not fed during transport. So, I move now to the unweaned calf, which I mentioned already. They're particularly vulnerable because they have an immature immune and digestive system, also because they're a byproduct of the dairy industry and they have a limited or a marginal economic value, which means that they're sometimes exposed to even more welfare hazards. Today's rules allow to transport them after 10 days of age without any time limit, provided that after 19 hours they can stop for a rest. Now, the proposal imposes an older age for transport. They have to be 5 weeks old before they can be transported, with a minimum live weight of 50 kilograms to ensure that they're strong enough to cope with the journey. And the journey time, again, this figure that you've heard already, to 9 hours, since there is today no practical way to feed them. However, we know that the technology is developing, and the proposal envisages that the transport time can be extended to 19 hours if a feeding system is approved. The time spent on sea, as I mentioned, doesn't count as journey time. The feeding requirements remain applicable, but because there is less risk for the animals in terms of the travel by sea, that is not being counted. Little look here at the dogs and cats. Even though they have their own proposal, there are some provisions in the transport proposal which deal with the dogs and cats. So the proposal contains specific and stricter requirements on the minimum age, 12 weeks, temperature and humidity ranges, and some feeding and watering intervals. And as I said, these rules complement the dogs and cats proposal that I'm going to talk about in a minute. So last now on the transport, I mentioned that we want to bring this into the 21st century. At the moment, everything's based on paper. Because the means of transport change location, the work of the official authorities is challenging and it sometimes happens too late. So we really think there's an opportunity here to use digital technology to be much more tracking what's going on in real time. Also, the paperwork is very burdensome and limited effectiveness, so we think we can really update this by making it possible to use apps and updating the information in real time. We want to make the controls more targeted and more effective, so we would digitalize all the current paperwork, the logs, the authorization of the transporters, the certificates of competence in a mobile application so that the official controls are simpler and more effective. Also, there would be data collected on the positioning of vehicles, which will be more effective than just self-declaration, which is what we have at the moment. And the proposal imposes the collection of data for policy monitoring and evaluation purposes. The last point on this, oops, sorry, excuse me, I didn't move it forward on the digital one. Exports and imports. Here we want to make it clearer what the obligations that will apply are as far as beyond the EU's borders are concerned. As I mentioned, this is already applied in law, but it hasn't really been applied very well in practice. So we want to impose some concrete mechanisms to perform checks in third countries by international inspection bodies, so-called certification bodies. We reinforce the rules on the transport by sea and ways to control them by requiring that there would be an animal welfare officer on board. And as you know, sadly, fortunately, it wasn't the case this summer, I think, but sadly, we've seen some very dramatic cases of accidents. I think in Romania in 2020, a vessel capsized and 14,000 sheep died. 1,200 cattle from Spain when vessels were rejected from Turkey in 2021. So we want to avoid, wherever possible, these kind of events happening again. The current proposal maintains the provisions that we've had, requiring the application of EU rules once the animals arrive. And the proposal also says that these requirements for animal welfare should be part of the import health certificate, so that better enables us to control what's going on imports. So now to the dogs and cats. Sorry, not the cats and dogs, the dogs and cats. I think As you know, I think around about half of households in the EU count either a cat or a dog. So we have 73 million dogs and 84 million cats in the EU. This is the first time that the EU has legislated. It has, I think, for me, been one of the most popular proposals I've worked on in the Commission. The last time I worked on anything this popular, it was getting rid of roaming charges. And that was quite a few years ago. So this has really been something where I think everybody has felt that the EU has responded to what they think is an important issue. At the moment, we have a patchwork of national legislation. But as I think the Minister already mentioned, we have quite a lot of deceptive practices, which has increased post-COVID because more people do have pets. Also online, we see quite a lot of fraud online now. There's unfair competition between breeders, and I think this is leading to disappointment, unexpected costs for people when they buy pets that are not in good shape, and of course, what we really want to avoid is suffering for the animals. So in 2023, EFSA adopted a report on the welfare of dogs and cats, and this has been the basis for the proposal. The proposal is divided into two parts, which apply to different actors. The first applies to the operators of the establishments, so those who keep dogs and cats for breeding, pet shops, or for donation, the shelters as well. For all establishments, the proposal lays down essential rules on the keeping of the pets, how they're fed, how they're housed, and their health and behavioural needs. So, for example, mutilations are prohibited unless they're necessary for neutering or medical purposes. Breeding establishments must be approved by the competent authorities before operating to make sure that they're complying with these rules. And the establishments have to provide information on responsible ownership to those people who purchase pets. So the practical consequences of having a companion animal, because there still seems to be, as there has been in the past, not really enough understanding of people who take on the responsibility, the joy, but also the responsibility of having a pet. And the proposal also says that all establishments should have a yearly veterinary animal welfare visit for guidance. This is intended to be something which is affordable, but which makes sure that all the establishments really know what they should be doing to make sure the animals are well looked after. So, the second part of the proposal is much wider in the way that it will apply, and it applies not just to the establishments, but to any one individual who supplies a dog or a cat, whether or not it's for remuneration, whether or not they are paying for the animal. So all animals need to be identified with a transponder, or otherwise known as being microchipped. They have to be registered in a national database by a vet, and the microchip also has to comply with international standards. There is an obligation to link the microchip to a database so that we avoid fraud and make sure that the identification is authentic. And also we need, of course, different member states to make their databases interoperable so that we really have an EU-wide system. And anyone who supplies an animal in the EU will have to prove the identification of the animal and its registration in the database. The proposal also foresees that we will have a system of checking the ID, which will be free of charge, of course. I think it makes it very citizen-friendly. And also, online buyers will have to, if there is an ad for a dog or a cat, to inform potential inquirers that they can check this ID of the animals presented for sales or donations. So anyone that buys an animal online will need to be informed of the fact that they should look for a microchip and that there's a registration in the database. So what about imports? Because we have seen from some third countries a lot of fraudulent import of pets. So we will require the imports also to comply with equivalent standards. The third country, therefore, has to demonstrate its ability to enforce equivalent standards. It's not just saying it has to be, they also have to be able to show that they can enforce them. And the proposal also says that animals have to come from establishments that are approved by the competent authorities in those third countries. The requirements are formalised in the import documentation, again allowing us to check compliance. And as for the EU dogs and cats, imported animals will also have to be identified with a microchip within a certain amount of time once they arrive within the EU and registered, of course, in a national database. So, thank you for your attention. I hope that has helped form a good backdrop for the discussion now and the debate that we will have on, in the first panel, but also throughout the conference. And thank you once again to the Belgian colleagues for organising this. It's really nice to see so many people, even though the stocking density amongst the speakers was very tight there. I take that as a good sign in this particular case. But thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. First of all, let me just get to know you a little bit better because, of course, I want to know who you are, and I think that the people in the audience want to know who you are. I have Andrea Gavinelli. Andrea Gavinelli, nice to meet you. Hello, hello. Head of Unit Animal Welfare, Directorate Crisis Preparedness in Food, Animals and Plants of the DG Santé. That is correct? Yes, you have your microphone there so you can loud and clear acknowledge every information. Miguel Ángel Higuera Pascual, what a wonderful name. Chairman of the Collega Animal Health and Welfare Working Party. You're also a master in pig production.
Yeah, I'm veterinarian.
Yes, and you're a veterinarian and a farmer. Absolutely amazing. Then we have Reineke Hameleers. Good afternoon, Reineke.
Hello, Olivier.
Hello, hello. CEO of Eurogroup for Animals, the leading pan-European animal advocacy organization convening more than 90 members in the EU and beyond.
And Gaia in Belgium. They are here. Yep.
They're here. There you go. And then sitting next to you, we have Bart van Veen, a senior researcher at the Impact Institute. You hold a master in science in human movement sciences and a PhD in mechanical engineering.
I do. Thanks very much for the welcome.
Wow, absolutely amazing. And then next to you, last but not least, we have Nadine Buys, Vice President of the Flemish Animal Welfare Council and Professor of Animal Breeding and Genetics at the University of Leuven.
That's correct.
Yeah. Is everything okay for you? Yes. If you need a drop of water, we have water. And it's a panel discussion. So this means that if you don't agree with anything that is being said, you can intervene. Just take your microphone and say like...
this will become very interesting. You realize that?
I know. That's why I'm here. I'm here as the ringmaster. I'm here to control everything. But anyways, let's keep it civil and keep it constructive. But I think that there might be some questions that lead to discussion. So I'm really, really curious. I'm going to start with a quote that I read from Nadine. Is that okay for you, Nadine? Of course, yeah. Animal welfare and economic profitability are not opposites. So we can combine animal welfare and economic profitability without any issues. My question is, how? What are the biggest challenges for the moment to have a balance between animal welfare and economic profitability? Yes, I'm going to throw the question, and whoever wants to take it, takes it. So there you go. Bart, no. Nadine. Okay,
it's maybe a bit rude to steal someone's quote, but I'm going to try and fill in from our perspective. I think we should put the true costs, integrate those in the decision-making of everything we do. And true costs are the costs that are not accounted for in the current economic model. So that also includes other factors like biodiversity, animal welfare, but also human health. And only if we realize an economy in which we take these true costs into account, outside of only financial profit for organizations and people who are already rich, I don't see a solution for this. So I fully agree with Nadine's quote. Thanks.
Okay. Nadine, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think one of the main issues is that if we want more animal welfare, and we do want that, there is also the farmers' welfare. And if you say, well, okay, animal welfare at the expense of the economic value, that is not going to work. So you have to value the farmer who does the effort to improve the animal welfare at the farm by way that, okay, he earns more, and we hear very often you should pay for the additional costs that the farmer has to make to improve the animal welfare. I don't think that's enough. I think that you have to pay more than what is needed to improve the animal welfare. You have to make sure that the farmer has some benefit as well on that. And that can only happen if you have that benefit throughout the whole chain. So the whole production chain has to adapt to that. And the final step of the production chain is the consumer that will have to pay more.
Yeah.
And then the more burden we put on it, so I'm glad you say, okay, we have to include also the costs that are normally not accounted for, but at the end, the consumer will have to pay, or someone will have to pay subsidies, but someone will have to pay for the increasing costs. And at least some part of the money should come with the farmer.
Okay. I see, Reineke, you were really reacting to what Nadine was saying. Do you agree on this? Do you say like, yeah,
I agree, absolutely. I think it should be a win-win-win. But, you know, I think we shouldn't mix up everything, and that's always the risk when you try to discuss animal welfare and also economic profitability. Let us first talk about the animals and what the animals need. And really look at also a different approach to animal welfare. And that means really looking at the science, who's now also saying we should look at positive welfare, not just the absence of negative experience, as we looked at welfare decades ago, but animals are really able also to experience positivity, you know, and how can we give them at least, you know, much, much better lives. So I think that should be the starting point. How can we give animals a much better life? And then how can we also make this economically happen? Because of course, you know, we also see that, you know, farmers need to get a much better benefit out of it than they are doing now. But put the animals first and then think about, okay, what is the journey to make this happen? And then everyone is responsible. Everyone will need to take a responsibility.
Yeah. Miguel, I see some twitching in the face. You are a farmer yourself. What do you think about this? How can the farmer benefit from the actions that are taken on the level of animal welfare?
No, this is quite important for us, and also I quite agree with all the people have said. First, of course, because we have to remind that we are in the European Union and we have the highest standard in the world in animal welfare. So when this discussion...
I would like to contest this.
Yes. You can contest it, but we have the higher legislation in animal welfare. So we are starting in a good point. We need that the animal welfare has to be increased. For sure.
Good.
Okay.
For sure.
No.
I would like to be sure that we as a farmer and also veterinarian, in our day work, we would like to work for the animals, to take care of the animals and also to improve our results. What is happening? Of course, that the animal welfare has a cost, and they have an indirect and direct cost. And right now, the ideal solution is the increase of the animal welfare will be improve our productivity, but it's not the case. Right now, the animal welfare is a direct cost. How we are increasing our production cost. So, and this is going to depend on the market. I fully agree with Nadine and also with the others, that at the end, the fantastic and ideal position is we can transfer the cost along the chains, but this is not happen so easy. It's not happening so easy. Because at the end, we have the offer, the demand, the market is open, and it's going to depend how many of the products you have and also what is the demand that you have. You have more offer than the demand, the prices go down. If you have less offer, more demand, the price goes up. But not is because the animal welfare, it's because the results of the offer and the demands. What's happened sometimes with animal welfare produce a reduction in the production. because maybe we have an increase of square meter, so we have less animals in the farm, less productions, and also some requirements on animal welfare reduce the productivity because increase the mortality, and you have more sanitary problems regarding with animal welfare. So the result is that the production is going to reduce, and also the profitability of the farmer is reducing. This is the only way that you can transfer the increase of the cost of production in the value chains, because you are reducing the offer. And I think that we can't not be agreed with this sentence, because we would like to have a strong production in Europe, and also that the farmer can also work every day in the farm to produce food for the people. So we think that we can find another way to try to create a link between the increase of the requirement in the farm and also how the consumer is going to pay for these products.
Okay. Before I let you intervene, then I'm going to give the microphone to Andrea. Andrea, you also wanted to add something.
Yes, indeed. Miguel Ángel is a producer. We have been discussing about cost. But in fact, what is the issue and the experience I got in these 2 years and a half of analysis of social and economics elements of animal welfare is that we have a difficulty in talk about the benefits. And there's a chapter that is in this period in which the resilience of the food system is very clear for the future, because Miguel Ángel also mentioned the level of the offers versus the competitiveness, the externalization of the markets. We have a clear and important element here to put on the table, that we have to be able to assume how many benefits we can get there. One example is you can read on internet, the Australian Farmer Organization, as you know, made a study of the cost, the reputational cost of not addressing animal welfare. And there were an amount of 6% of the total business turnaround. So much that they calculated that was a good investment to promote a campaign to have legislation on animal welfare in Australia, to compete with the best legislation in the world. So in fact, it's true to say one thing, that because we acted with a visionary approach in the EU 25 years ago and more with animal welfare, with some standards in the legislation, really the first of the world, that inspire even the World Animal Welfare Organization in putting together the first standards, to be honest, we got a big advantage to stay in front. The farmer like Miguel Ángel profited of an incredible reputational advantage, so much that now we import in the EU products of very high quality in terms of welfare. New Zealand lamb, for example, or Australian or Argentinian meat. We know these are 6% of our lamb being produced in Australia comes to here and is higher animal welfare than us. But anyway, these benefits is in the EU, gaining market, strong market, and we have to look ahead. The resilience of our system is not in massive production and cost. It is in quality, reputational quality, and getting more consumer than before.
Okay. So, first thing that I want to address is that you were saying when Miguel Ángel said, is it Miguel or Miguel Ángel? Miguel Ángel. No,
Miguel is easier.
It has to be the correct name, Miguel Ángel. So the first thing I want to know is, when Miguel Ángel mentioned the highest standards, you were immediately intervening and no.
He knew that. He knew that. That's why he said it. No, I mean, we have had this discussion before. But yes, clearly we don't have the highest standards in the world. Look, you know, what's happening on farms. We are facing a full-blown farm animal welfare crisis. You know, the current legislation is very outdated, you know, and then so many farm animal species are not protected at all. Consider dairy, cows, consider turkeys, consider fish, but there are many, many more. So, and this is also not good for farmers. When you look at it from an economic perspective, there's a very unlevel playing field. But moreover, the animals are really the victim here, and they are paying a big price. And what I always regret when we have these discussions about the economics is that we tend to forget about the animals. The the animals have been defined as sentient beings in the highest legislation of the EU, but the reality is very different. And consumers and citizens are also very clear that they want this to change. So I think that should be the starting point of the discussion, and I'm happy that there is agreement on that we need to change this, but now we also need to do it. There were very high expectations for this political term. We would see a capped animals regulation, a slaughter regulation, the end the cage age ECI, banning the cages, and this is all not happening. So yeah, I think we should acknowledge that.
Yeah, Bart, you wanted to say something.
I would like to add something to that, because I think what we're losing out of sight is the common goal of our food system, is a healthy and sustainable diet for everyone. And we need to discuss what the position of animals is in this. And acknowledging that animals are sentient beings, do we need this many animals in our food system to actually provide a healthy and sustainable diet? And if we cut down the numbers of animals in our food system, doesn't that also provide more room for not only for the animals, but also for farmers to produce quality animal products and receive a true price, a fair price for their products?
Yeah, I just want to, I'm just wondering, because if we look at the everyday diet today, it's, well, meat makes a part of it. It's a part of it. And the thing is that everyone wants to be able to have a steak. Everyone wants to be able to have roast chicken. Everyone wants to be able to...
Not everyone, but...
Well, a lot. Yeah. A lot of people. Not everyone.
98%
vegetarians.
Of the people, yes.
But no, I'm also not saying that it's
but that's okay,
nobody
that's okay.
does, but I'm saying not everyone.
Not everyone, not everyone. You're absolutely right. But the thing is that if people want to add this to their diet, they want to have it at the lowest cost. And that might have an impact if we say, like, okay, we have to count the economical impact of animal welfare, and then the prices will go up, like you said, Nadine.
Do they want it to be for the lowest cost, or do they want it to be affordable? That's two different things.
Well, affordable, and maybe also there's something. What is the price of a chicken nowadays? If you go for a chicken, it's like 6-7 euros.
I have no clue.
And 6-7 euros.
One of the people
is that sustainable? Is that something that we can keep on doing?
But we really need to better also inform consumers, you know, and to make them part of this journey, because at the moment, meat is very cheap. And the farmers are paying a price, but the animals are paying a massive price.
We think that the meat has to be affordable for all the people. So I think that maybe not all the people in Europe have the same salary that the people that we have here. And I think all the people have to be able to pay an affordable food to eat every day. So when we are talking about that, it's very easy to say, okay, increase the price. Increase the price for who? For all the citizens that we are representing, or only for a special class? We are doing a social class for the people who have to eat meat or not. We're not in this direction. We think that the meat and also the food have to be affordable for all the people and all the classes. Because I think your statement has been a little bit classist.
I agree with you, but I think we are, we should lift the discussion at a different level and really look also at how can we, as you said, create another food environment, as they call it now in Brussels. That's a beautiful word, food environment, where we also make the healthy choice the most affordable one. And that's very different than now, because now, I mean, the unhealthy choice is the cheapest. And that is how can you inform consumers, take them with you on that journey. And then, of course, a very important element here, and that we agree on, is to make sure that all the imported products will comply with our standards, so that we don't have these very cheap meat imports in the shelves. Clearly consumers can't see that at all now. They have to look very good. Non-EU, it's completely mad. And that will really also protect farmers and make sure that there's not that competition, with producers abroad, because clearly we can never compete, with such import. No.
What do you think? Yeah, Nadine, go ahead.
Yes, I fully agree on that, and I think that avoiding that import of very cheap products that don't comply with the rules that we are asking for, that is very important. But if we talk about the food system and we say, okay, we eat too much meat and everybody has to be able to afford a piece of meat or meat every day, no, I don't think so. I think we have to reduce the meat consumption, that's for sure. But if we do that and we produce less animals, I think it's very important that in a sustainable animal production, animal welfare is part of it. And I mean part of it, well, we know that we have the challenges of carbon footprint. We want to produce animals as efficient as possible, but as efficient as possible, that means that we are pushing them to the limits of what they are capable to do. Well, if you look then at animal welfare, that might be the opposite. It's not the opposite of economic value, but it might be the opposite of carbon footprint. And it might be the opposite of impact on the environment. And I think the only solution, or well, main part of it, is we should reduce that consumption of animal proteins. And while we are doing that, take advantage of the opening that is there to put animal welfare as one major part of a sustainable chain. And how you have to do that? Well, make sure that the whole chain has a win-win-win on it. Starting at the farmer.
But if you look, for example, the agriculture outlook of the DG Agri, go in this direction. European Union is going to reduce the production of animal products, for sure. The rest of the world, not at all. They are going to increase. So we are going to move efficiency, environmental efficiency, animal production in Europe, that our carbon footprint is lower, to move for another part in the world. So at the end, the average is going that we are going to increase the emissions due to the production of animal welfare in another part of the world, because here in the European Union, we are clear. We are going to reduce. We are going to reduce the production, not only because the legislation of animal welfare, there are legislation in environment, and also we have a huge problem with the new generation of farmers that never is taking this problem. So we are going to be in this direction. Right now, what is the problem? That the farmer that we would like to be farmer in Europe has to be in perfect balance between, of course, increase the requirement in animal welfare, harmonize the requirement in animal welfare in all the species, in all the countries, and also try to be competitive, not in the export because we are going to lose the export, also to try to defend our producers for the import of the products, because we can talk about the similar and also requirements, but it's not going to be possible. So at the end, right now we are importing meat products for the third countries that are not complying even this legislation that we have today. So it's going impossible to try to stop. We are importing poultry meat coming from Brazil.
But then how do you see the role of the EU in the future? What are things that the EU has to put in place to, one, protect animal welfare, but also protect the local farmers and to be aware that we are on the same level as the countries that surround us?
I think we have to have an more holistic overview. Okay, we have to focus in the animal welfare because the animal has to be also very well treated. But at the end, we have the farmers that every day is working with the farm. That I think is something that all the people are missing. So behind every farmer, every farm, every animals, also with or without legislation, there are a farmer taking care of these animals. So, of course, the farmers is very important. But also the requirements that maybe we are going to establish in Europe also have to be a very good balance between the cost of productions and also what is the market that we can have. So, and this balance is very weak balance, and we have to be sure what is the step that we are going to do, because if we go further that we are able to support it, we are going to destroy our producers, everything, because it's going to be cheaper to import products for the third countries than produce in European Union.
Yeah. You wanted to intervene, Andrea?
Yes, a consideration, because one question that is very important is, what is the farmer we are talking about? We introduced with our legislation in a directive of 98 the roots of a European convention, trying to legitimate competence in a farmer to relate with an animal. Now, you know, when you talk about poultry or dairy or pigs, the ratio between one man and the number of animals could be 1 to 4,000 or even more. So it's clear that the skill that are demanded to this man responsible for 4,000 or 8,000 animals or even 20,000 when you talk about chickens is an incredible responsibility if you treat them as sentient beings. That's come now how the consumer are looking, and the people, like my daughter, can look to a farmer. The idealistic farmer is the one that is knowing the animals by name. This is the imaginary of the people we interview with the Eurobarometer. And by logic, you say these people are not competent. Mm-hmm. They can pretend cheap meat. It's also because they don't understand about the business. But then when you present to these people that one person can care about 120,000 chickens in 3 buildings, 40, 40, and 40, that is the average today. Mm-hmm. And you tell how far these men know about these sentient beings that are located there. These people, of course, don't understand. And then we come to what I was saying before, the reputational cost. And the reputational benefits on the opposite side that we could create here, imagining, and then the study of Copa-Cogeca is true. Getting rid of cages in a longer transition period could cost 4% of the production, yes. And will be, in terms of reputational gain, this is my add-on, not in the study, probably 50% of your gain in the future. Sorry, let me finish. Now, when we imagine this first European Convention on Animal Welfare in the Council of Europe 40 years ago, nobody was thinking to sit here about Sustainable Development Goals and about the future of the globe. Now, which model will survive is the question in terms of economics. Mm-hmm. And that's the big issue where we don't have an answer.
No.
Andrea,
but can I add something? Sorry.
Only one question. Well, sorry.
I would like to touch back upon a couple of points here. We're talking about efficiency and about balance, and I think we should really look at the EU roles of guarding our energy balance in our food system. In the past 50 years, our food system has delivered 50% more output per hectare of land in terms of energy, but has demanded 600% more input in terms of energy. If we can cut down on these energy demands, we create so much space for so many more animals and so many more humans. If we look at food waste, it's 30% of our food gets wasted. 30%. If we want to reach carbon goals like you need, cut down 30% of that waste, or cut down the waste and you cut down 30% of your carbon emissions. Same holds for animal welfare. If we cut down food waste, you gain 30% of all the animal suffering in the whole EU. Mm-hmm. If we guard this energy balance, we can create so much more space, and we can create more space for more extensive farming. Mm-hmm. We've been guarded by politicians and by investors into a high-intensive farming system. Mm-hmm. Does that serve the purpose, our common goal of a healthy and sustainable food system?
Yeah. Links to the idea that Nadine mentioned earlier, the mindset that has to change on a number of levels, and maybe also this mindset is that food is not something that is just a given. It's something that needs to be cherished and needs to be also protected and not thrown away.
Yes.
Absolutely. You wanted to add something, Miguel?
Yes, I have 2 questions about that. Only about the extensive production of the animals. I have the example in Spain that we have the Iberico system, that is 1 animal per 10,000 square meter, 1 hectare. Yes. How many countries, how many farmers can do that? How many consumers can pay for that? Also, we have limited productions because we have not enough consumers for this kind of products. But it's an example. If imagine in Netherlands, for example, if you put 1 pig in 1 hectare, impossible to produce any animals. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also another thing that is quite important is that for the imaging point of view, as I was farmer, of course, the animal welfare is a positive imagine for us. The new farms that we are building is with free cages. Why not? For sure, because for the farmers, I think it's, from an economical point of view, the farmers, it's easier to build a new farm with the new system, with the new requirements, with new technologies, with new indicators, than rebuild an existing farm. So we have the cost, and also you can also provide it, that in a farm, in a pig farm, a new farm, the increase of the cost of the production regarding the animal welfare represents between 5 and 7% more than we have already. In an existing farm that we have to rebuild, redestroy, and build another time, the increase of the cost is a 30%. Mm-hmm. So it's clear that for the emerging sector, there are people that by voluntary basis are making investment and progress in animal welfare. For sure, we would like to do in this direction, but at the end, the key point is the balance between the economic impact, the survival of the farmers, and also, of course, to have a better requirements in animal welfare.
And that balance is currently completely off.
No. So the balance...
You're talking about the intensive livestock farming in the Netherlands, where I'm from, and we are producing so much more than that we're actually eating in the Netherlands, in the EU. Mm-hmm. We've lost the locality completely out of sight in this whole discussion. Why are farmers not guarding nature, guarding animals, and producing food at the same time?
We are going to follow to the same discussion at the end. Why you are buying telephones in China? Why you are not producing in the Netherlands? So you are exporting because you are a meat producer and a vegetable producer, but you are another goods that are not produced in your country, you have to import. Welcome to the global market. This is the global market.
Yeah, but at the same time, you are saying we need to tackle that. You know, we need to make sure that imported products. So that also means that you have to look at your own model. We can never win, you know, this race to the bottom. We should go for a race to the top as the EU. That's, you know, the only solution for everyone.
I fully agree with you, and also we know that the indirect impact of the increase the animal welfare regulations is that our model of production is going to change, but not in the direction that all of you are thinking. Of course, the increase of regulation in animal welfare make a bigger concentration of the producers, larger producers, and the small and medium producers is going to suffer more. So because who is going to be able to have credit for the banks? Who are going to be able to pay for the new regulations? The small farmers? Not at all. We have all
but
these
it doesn't have to be like that.
Because we have also what happened when the poultry and the pigs has to make the conversion in animal welfare 10 and 12 years ago. That is also a conversion in the sector. So it's a concentration, but it's a question of the market. We are talking about the economic impact and how to find the balance. How to find the balance is to be stronger. To be stronger is you have to be bigger. Of course, you have niche of production. You have fantastic niche of production of small producers that can do it. But at the end, what is our worry? Our worry is the biggest international companies that are very happy to increase our requirement in animal welfare because they would like to sell the products in European Union. And I can tell the names of a lot of companies from US, on Brazil, that are very happy to export the product to Europe.
The only thing I have to reply to this is what has growing bigger and bigger and bigger brought us so far? A carbon crisis, a biodiversity crisis, a planet that's
animal
under
welfare
pressure,
crisis.
An animal welfare crisis.
Okay, now let's
turn it
and we're still not providing a healthy and sustainable diet to everyone.
This is the ideal, fantastic position. And I would like also to take it. But this is not true. The real is that we are in a global market and we can avoid that. In our auction at a farmer, we would like also to prohibit the import of pig products, meat products, vegetable products, everything for the third countries that are not compliant with our legislation, not only in animal welfare, in environment, in social, in labor, everything. We can import it, but this is not true. We have not enough.
It's in the end the politicians who have to decide on that.
But that was my question. What does the EU have to do? Because if you ban products from third countries, is that something that we can do?
That's a very
Andrea.
good question.
Yes. Let's say one thing. As I said, our talks come from long-standing experience because the Europeans at the first. And these grow up elements that as never before. You saw next stage we talk about dogs and cats welfare and the fact that because of a trade of very dangerous and low quality for health and welfare animals, we are passing a proposal with an equivalency in terms of the standards of farming, in terms of that creates breeding of animals, and elements that are connected with the important fact that people producing and breeding animals in Europe cannot compete with the low-quality breeding outside. Now, today, of course, one thing is clear. At least we know how much we import in terms of beef and veal, or how much we import for pig products. We know it's around the 1% of what we consume. When we talk about poultry products, it's the 6% and the 1% of the fresh eggs, of which consume in the EU. And we talk of the beef is around the 5%. These are the data I have from my colleague from DG Agri. So anyway, our import is in any case still not a big wave, it's limited, to be honest. It can be submitted to an important pressure from the fact that we have also environmental rules and several elements that in the EU people are caring for, because we wish to live in an happy place and safe and environmentally progressing well, not bad. Conclusion. With this issue of animal welfare, what is fascinating is that we have, again, the capacity to work ahead of many others, because we have gained land. Many are behind. And that's why, with this dimension that we saw even coming with the ethical dimension of import and the ethical effect we attach to this, we are in a privileged justification to play, for example, starting also with the fact that we have, of course, to play on fair ground. With, for example, now looking on a label for animal welfare at European level, we are studying it because we have so many labels, and we have now the announcement that I know here in Belgium also. This is an important reputational element that is seen as opportune. But the more a label we will have in Europe, different, the more for the producer will be a drama, because we are strong and we are a single market. Yeah. And that's why the answer, what we can do, we have to work hand in hand. Transparency, system of labeling, granting people to understand what they have, and our concurrent producer outside have to compete with this. That's the only way.
Yeah. What we mentioned before that, I'm going to come back to you right in a minute, but what we mentioned before, what Nadine also said, is the expectation management of the consumer. Because they expect, if they want to eat meat, if they want to have meat on the table, they expect to have it at an affordable price. They expect to have it at a price that they can find meat in the supermarket at X amount of euros. Now, I, as a layman, because I'm a layman, of course, I'm not as detailed and as well educated as you all are. If I see advertisements for, let's say, animal products, then I see an image that is created. I see open fields. I see animals in the open. I see grass. I see a farmer, especially a farmer with a bit of a beard, and then he has this straw in his mouth, and then you have this idyllic view of the farm. But this is not at all what the reality is. Should we educate consumers more about animal welfare? Should we be more open and transparent about, like, this is happening? Because the only images that we have until today are those of whistleblowers who have filmed things with hidden cameras, and then it's big news in the media, like, look what happens in the slaughterhouses. Yes, of course, this happens in the slaughterhouses. And is that okay? Well, that's a discussion that is not for this stage. But then again, maybe we could educate people more, like, this is what is going on, this is what a real farm looks like. If we talk about 40,000 chickens, that's immense. We don't have that. We don't have that image. I, as a consumer, I don't have that image. I see a chicken running around on a farm, which is not at all the case. So.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And I think we have a huge responsibility in being more transparent about animal production. And one of the things that could help in that is a label where you say, okay, if you have this label on a piece of meat or milk or whatever, any animal product, that means that that animal has been raised according to those standards. And because it's, yeah, I find it a pity that when animal production comes into the news, it's usually because something went wrong. Yeah. And it's usually a disaster or something in the slaughterhouse or whatever. But there are a lot of farmers that really want to comply with this animal welfare and that really take very well care of their animals. And I think at this moment, a lot of people don't really know how animals are produced. And the discussion that we had earlier as well, it is a reality that farms are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We can say it has to go smaller, but if you look at the latest years, you see that the farms are getting bigger. That means that that farmer with the cigarette in his mouth is not at all
no, a straw, not
days,
a cigarette.
But that farmer does not have the time to look at every individual animal all the time. You need to have animals that you can cope with, that are more resilient. So it's a whole package. It's a whole, it's not just the animals, but it's also the farmers, and it has to be a manageable animal. But we have to realize that they are raised in huge farms. And we can say, no, we have to do it differently, and we have to raise all pigs, well, on small farms, and all pigs have to go outside. It's not reality at this moment.
No, and also small is still pretty big.
That is what Miguel Ángel said, that the small farms, that where every farmer knows the animal by name, that is utopia.
But that doesn't mean that we cannot improve the animal welfare in those huge farms. It's not,
because
it's not by definition that a smaller farm has a better animal welfare.
The animal welfare is individual. Only one statement. Animal welfare is individual, animal by animal. Doesn't matter if you are one animal, 10 animals, or 1,000 animals. Animal welfare is individual, one animal, one animal. So it's also because we have the debates about the size of the farm.
Sure. And the bigger the scale, the bigger the risks, of course. But I think, yes, transparency is very important. Labeling is a big topic. I see we only have 3 minutes left.
That's okay,
But very quick response, as long as labeling is not mandatory and it doesn't include all the products on the shelves, it's pretty useless, because there are so many claims. Consumers just don't see, the wood for the trees. So, I mean, we need to have mandatory labeling that everyone has to comply with. We have that system on the shell eggs that has been proven really successful, and that it will also lift up farmers. And we have some beautiful examples, for example, in the Netherlands with the Better Life scheme that could, be an inspiration, but it has to be mandatory and has to involve all the animal products.
Okay, I just want to have one last question. That's just a thinking exercise, and it's not on my paper. It's just something that comes to mind. Let's say that the three of you, Nadine and Bart and Reineke, you three, you're farmers, and you have a huge farm, and you have like, I don't know, 60,000 animals. And someone comes to you with a regulation and say like, well, we have to change something on the level of animal welfare. What would you do?
What would you do? I would really be open and say, bring it on. Let's think about how to make this happen. Let's create this together.
What would your first idea be? You're a farmer. You're working every day, day and night, to keep your farm going, and you have like, let's say, 50, 60,000 animals, and someone says like, okay, from the EU, there's a new regulation on animal welfare, and it's going to have an impact on your business. What would be your first reaction?
I think, farmers, and Miguel has also said it, have an ethical responsibility. So I'm not a farmer, clearly, you can, but yeah, I think you have an ethical responsibility. And as we said in the beginning, it can be a win-win-win. Yeah. Lots of best practices have shown that.
Yeah. Nadine?
Well, it's not really at the level of the farmer, but I'm an animal geneticist. And I would say one of the things that we should look at is stop pushing the animals to their limits. Yep. At this moment, we are producing animals that have a very low feed conversion ratio, that grow very, very fast. If you look at broiler chickens, they are really at their limits. In pigs, we are going in the same direction. That is something, and that's why I talk about that balance that much, because if we want to be the carbon footprint as low as possible, those are the animals that we need. But if we say no, we want the integrity of the animal, or at least the animal as a sentient being that needs to be able to, in the 5 domains, that needs to be able to have the good nutrition and so on, then pushing it to the limits of that growth is really something that I think is a problem. Okay. But that's not on the level of the farmer, that's on the level of the breeding organizations. Yep.
I really want to add to that I think a conversation on different levels should be held here. And as a farmer, I would start thinking and talking to the EU and go back to the EU, but also to my investors in what am I producing, for whom, and where am I producing this?
Yep.
And I'm also not saying, and it's interesting how my comments have started this conversation on big farms versus small farms. Not what I said. I said locality. We've lost locality in the discussion on our food system. And I think we should really get back to that. What am I producing, for whom, and where am I producing it?
Yep.
And I'm not saying that if I have 60,000 chickens in my barn that I would change from one day to the other.
Okay.
But I would really want to have this conversation with the EU, with my investors, with the people buying my food on how can we improve this, because we're pushing animals to their limits.
Yeah. Now, question for you too. Question for you too. You are people who are really concerned about animal welfare, and you see these farmers with huge farms that have like 60,000 or 80,000 animals, and they're pushing their animals to the limit. What would you tell them? What would be the first advice you would give those farmers if we were to change something on animal welfare?
It's very complex because at the end, the animal welfare, is, as we were talking, is related with economy, and also the farmers knows that is make any change in the farms is going to cost. So at the end, depending on the break-even that the farmer goes, because at the end is the difference between I'm going to be tomorrow farmer or not. I fully agree with Bart that also is going to be dependent of the time. Why? Because when you see an animal with a straw in the mouth and with open space, you can see also better animal welfare. But I, as a farmer and veterinarian, I have to see the whole pictures. And I see salmonella, and I see African swine fever, and I see high pathogenic avian flu, and I see wolf attacks, and I see that the animals that are suffering extreme temperatures, and I see that it's better to protect the animals in the farms. So depending that you see. And also it's something that we are not trying, we are also losing the transparency to see to the population, to the citizens. Because, for example, in the Eurobarometer, 84% of the European citizens would like to have a better animal welfare in the farm animals. But only 6% of the European citizens knows how the farmer runs.
But that's not a surprise because it's all hidden.
Yeah, well, yes, but this is a problem for us.
Totally
no, Reineke, I told that this is a problem for us, that we are not able to communicate what we are doing in the farms to the society. And maybe one of the reasons, one of the tools that we have is the labeling. Maybe how to try to teach and also to inform to the society how the animal are produced, how the animals is in the farms.
But my question was, what would you tell farmers, what would be your first advice to a farmer if you say, like, we have to increase on animal welfare, we have to do something, what would be the first thing you would say?
The first for me is the training,
okay.
The information, to have really, that they have to change something in the farms, to be sure that it's working. So we need more information, clear advance for the scientifics, for the university, to know exactly if you are going to make any change in a square meter or in management, that is going to work, it is going to improve the real animal welfare. It's not a requirement, it's animal welfare, because maybe sometimes we are misunderstanding the minimum requirements with the animal welfare. Okay. So you have to be sure that your animal is going to be better, and also you are going to be able to work with these animals in these new conditions. So training, and also to be sure that this step that you are going to do is not only in your farm, also in your mind.
Okay, Andrea, for you the same question. You see this farmer, a lot of animals. What would be the first advice that you would give this farmer to increase animal welfare?
First of all, one thing, increase animal welfare is not coming alone, because animal welfare improvements brings animal health, brings better productivity, better placement of your farm in front of many. I was very convinced of one thing 30 years ago, that grouping calves from the single box was a great advantage for welfare. I've been studying it for years, and was a great improvement for the quality of the meat and the safety of these animals. In Piemonte, where I come from, we were producing veal meat, the white one. And no one of the farmers I was knowing as a vet was give me one little positive word when I was saying, take them out of the box, let them play, 10 together. It will be nice, and they will be safer, and you don't have to treat them for the enteritis. We went through legislation in '97 that was adopting this. And I was not even able to go back to my village when they were saying, in 5 years, our business is out.
Yeah.
Because they will all die by diarrhea, okay? Now, I still go back to my village. The 5 farmers that were at school with me, they are producing gorgonzola cheese with dairy cows and produce milk cows. Now, the change of the color of the meat is a little bit pinky, not white as in the 90s. But they will never get back to an individual crate for a calf. And you know why? Because the only change can happen is when the people believe in it and understand what you mean. One of the big problems we have here is to explain why we want no cages, for example, and where there are the advantages, where we want pigs with a tail, and why it works. All these things have to be explained, and this is part of the training, the formation, because it should be the first thing to see if I want to be a farmer, to understand that a pig with a tail works, and works better than without. Yeah. And that's, for the calf, is my small history. I'm in animal welfare since my life, and I still believe that legislation is doing nothing if you don't do the understanding first. And that's why we're sitting here together. Nice.
I think that we can come to our conclusion because we passed our time already for 6 minutes, but no worries, we will have coffee soon. I think that we can conclude that there's still a lot of work to do in the EU, that there is still a big discussion between profitability, animal welfare, how can we keep the farmers happy, how can we keep consumers happy, how can we keep this wonderful panel of 5 people happy. I think we can continue this discussion with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. What do you think? Would that be a good idea? I think it will be a good idea, but not before we give you a huge round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to do it one by one. Wait. You're too soon, you're too soon. First of all, Andrea Gavinelli. Big round of applause. Miguel Ángel Higuera. Reineke Hameleers. Bart van Veen. Nadine Buys. We will have a coffee break, ladies and gentlemen. We will start again at 4 sharp. So at 4 p.m. sharp, we will start. Enjoy your coffee, and thank you very much for my panelists. Thank you.
Your Royal Highness, Ministers, dear colleagues, representative of the regional, national and European administrations, ladies and gentlemen. I am very happy and honored to welcome you to Brussels today for our Call to Care for Animal Welfare event, as part of the Belgian Presidency of the Council of the European Union. We are organizing this important long-standing event together with my colleagues responsible for animal welfare in Flanders and Brussels. We are very proud that Belgium is at the forefront of animal welfare. Having 3 ministers dedicated to animal welfare is already proof of that. Animals bring so much to our daily lives. In my cabinet, we are lucky to regularly enjoy the company of Cook and June, adopted by 2 colleagues, whose presence brightens up our days in the office and improves both our well-being and theirs. One welfare. Every day, we work to transform our relationship with animals, with all living things. All too often, however, animals are still seen as goods for production or consumption. Yet, you don't take in a puppy or a hamster in the same way you'd buy a t-shirt or an ice cream. Of course, that seems logical to us, and I don't doubt that you being here is proof of your sensitivity in this matter. But unfortunately, as a result of impulsive purchases, we are still seeing, too often, animals being abandoned, neglected, and even abused. Our administration, our Walloon Animal Welfare Police, seizes several hundreds of animals every year, dogs and cats, but also reptiles, birds, horses, cows. The shelters in our region take in several thousand stray or abandoned cats and dogs every year. The work done on the ground is significant, working together in the fight against animal abuse. Wallonia is a region at the forefront of animal welfare in Europe, and we're really proud of it. As a result, we have a Walloon Animal Welfare Code, which contains a series of fundamental principles to protect animals. Here are a few examples. Animals are sentient beings with specific needs according to their nature. Every person shall provide the animal they own with food, care and housing or shelter appropriate to its nature, its physical and ecological needs, its state of health, and its degree of development, adaptation, or domestication. Another example, it is an offense to cause unnecessary injury, mutilation, pain, or suffering to an animal. They are strong, important principles, but also very general. Because ultimately, what are the ecological needs of a dog, a donkey, or a fish? Again, if I take the example of a dog, we would agree that the needs of a Chihuahua are different to those of a German Shepherd. And of course, each individual has their own specific needs. We must therefore take more precise and concrete measures to ensure this overarching principle help animals in practice. And I will give you 3 examples. First of all, the animal detention permit. Currently in Wallonia, anyone who wishes to take on an animal for companionship must present a sort of certificate of good conduct. This means they need to request this document from their municipal administration, which proves they haven't lost the right to own an animal. If the person has committed animal abuse, and if a judge has decided they can no longer own any animals, the document will be refused. This is a small revolution that we implemented in our region about a year ago. This measure enables us to fight against impunity by ensuring that anyone who has abused an animal and been forbidden from owning any animals can no longer acquire one. And second, ensure that people have fully considered the decision and don't buy an animal on the spur of the moment in a shop. Because we know that these impulse purchases too often lead to abandonment a few weeks later. Second example, we have also banned various accessories, including the use of electric collars for dogs. These accessories can be very harmful for animal welfare, and the veterinarians have confirmed that there are other methods that are gentler but just as effective. My message with this ban is also that a dog is a long-term commitment. They are a companion that you will live with for many years. Adapting to one another and communicating will take time. It's an investment. It's not something innate. It's not a given. Like a relationship, of course, it takes work. And you can't use an accessory that delivers an electric shock to quickly or easily train an animal. I want to totally disconstruct that idea. What's important is time, knowledge, and surrounding yourself with experts, like vets, for example. Third example, the end to puppy mills. Animals are not consumer goods, as I've said. In Wallonia, we had puppies being imported when they were too young or ill and transported in poor conditions. Imported to be resold so that the trader can offer several breeds, as if in a catalogue or a supermarket, in short. There were also reproductive females exhausted from repeated litters. Animals housed in confined spaces, etc. We have therefore put stricter conditions in place for raising companion animals and banned the import of puppies from abroad. Together with my colleagues responsible for animal welfare, we are very happy that the Commission has put forward a regulation on this topic, and we're pleased to be working on the issue. Here are some examples of legislation that we have implemented in Wallonia over the past few years. Of course, we are in regular contact with our colleagues in Flanders and Brussels so that we can make progress on these issues together across Belgium as a whole. The next discussion panel, entitled Animal Welfare, Ethics and Technology, Modern Solutions to Modern Challenges, will go even further on the following two topics in particular, which take another look at our relationship with animals. Firstly, the theme of haplotypes is unfortunately very revealing on the way in which we view animals today. We've essentially got to the point where animals, particularly dogs and cats, in extreme situations, are increasingly selected to meet purely aesthetic criteria. These fashion effects cause terrible suffering to these animals and mean lifelong medical treatment, repeated operations, a shorter life expectancy. We shape them, sometimes so that they resemble babies, for example, and we make them suffer for our pleasure. This obviously raises some big ethical questions, as well as very specific solutions that we can put in place, which include breeding methods, but also raising public awareness. We all have a role to play. I also have the pleasure of presenting to you, for the first time, an extract for an upcoming communication campaign on this important theme.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Walter et je suis un hypertype.
Bonjour Walter. Expliquez-nous Walter.
Ben moi, vous voyez quoi, j'ai une colonne trop longue par rapport à ma taille. Faut croire que les humains trouvent ça marrant. Du coup, j'en suis à ma seconde hernie discale. Je peux pas sauter, ni courir. C'est pas une vie, ça.
Non, ce n'est pas une vie. Et ce n'est pas votre faute. Merci pour votre témoignage. Lily, vous voulez aussi parler?
Oui. J'ai souvent l'impression que les humains oublient que je suis un chien. Et adulte en plus. Ils aiment ma petite tête ronde et mes grands yeux et me traitent comme un bébé. On me trimballe tout le temps dans une poussette ou un sac alors que moi, j'ai envie de marcher et d'explorer, comme les autres chiens.
Ça vous choque? Pourtant, de plus en plus de nos animaux de compagnie sont sélectionnés pour accentuer à l'extrême certains critères esthétiques à la mode. C'est ce qu'on appelle les hypertypes. Mais cette sélection excessive peut avoir un impact terrible sur leur bien-être et sur leur santé. Nous avons tous et toutes un rôle à jouer pour améliorer la situation. Vous trouverez plus d'informations sur le portail du bien-être animal.
Mrs. Claire Diedrich, President of the Walloon Animal Welfare Council and Professor at the University of Namur, and Mrs. Rowena Packer, Lecturer at the Royal Veterinary College, University of London, who I would like to thank for coming especially for this event, will tell you more in a few moments. The second theme, addressed by the panel, will be the issue of illegal online sales. Once again, for economic reasons, we see people selling animals illegally on social media, for example, even though the breeding of companion animals and the related advertising are strictly regulated in our country. This is another complex theme that goes beyond our borders, and artificial intelligence could be an interesting lever to address the issue. Mr. Lluc Bono, PhD researcher at the FARI Institute, and Brussels Police Inspector Julien Lacave will also tell you more, particularly about the legislations and the Brussels project specific to this topic. As you can see, we are making some real advances in animal welfare. There is, of course, still some way to go, to continue showing greater respect to animals. And too often, we have opposing interests and point of views, economy versus animal welfare, animal versus humans, etc. However, I'm convinced that a society that shows greater respect for living beings, animals, and nature is a society that looks to the future, a society that respects itself more, a more sustainable, robust, and resilient society. We can't go on seeing animals as resources at our mercy or as objects. We can see where that is leading us. Health crisis, loss of biodiversity, animal abuse, all of these realities are obviously closely linked, as to One Health concept so clearly expresses. I am therefore especially happy that we are making progress at a European level to strengthen the regulations surrounding animal welfare. This will allow us to meet the expectation of citizens who have responded in their millions to European citizen initiatives on the topic. We will respond to very legitimate requests made by several animal welfare organizations, who I would like also to welcome here today. We will also be working more in line with scientific advances, which provide more proof every day of the sensitivity and intelligence of animals. Furthermore, I hope that, in the same vein, the Commission will soon have its own European Commissioner, specifically dedicated to animal welfare. This is a field in its own right, in which there is a lot of work left to be done, requiring proactive and cross-cutting action. Together, we must be a European Union looking towards the future, towards progress, towards a respect for others, for living beings, and for animals. Thank you for being there, for your attention, and for your commitment.
Everyone, thank you so much for having me here. My first time in Belgium. I feel very awful saying that at the grand old age of 36. I apologise for not coming to your country sooner. It is wonderful to be here and for this to be such an important event and to have an issue that's been very close to my heart for a long time on the agenda. So today, as we've said, we've got 3 questions to answer that include a lot of talk around veterinary science, thinking of the actual physiology and anatomy of dogs. But more than that, actually thinking about the human side of this problem. This is very much a human issue rather than an animal issue. So as we know, there's huge diversity in the domestic dog. We might think of them as mankind's greatest genetic experiment. We have managed to create a mammal that is varying in so many different ways. In their size, we've got a huge diversity, so they are the most varied terrestrial land mammal. But we also have changes in things like their coat type, so their colour, their length, their proportions, which we'll talk about a lot today, thinking about things like their muzzle length, their back length, a couple of things we've already spoke about this morning and this afternoon. But when we think back to the original relationship with the dog, we have been intimately in this dyadic relationship with dogs for many thousands of years, estimated around at least 14,000 years ago. And originally we had a very functional relationship with dogs, and we had some impact upon their body shape through selection for what we might think of as types. So rather than the breeds we see today, we had broad types of dog, and often their body shape reflected what their function was. So for example, a guard dog would generally be very heavy set and be intimidating because of that, where we might have, for example, a dog that chases down prey being very lean and athletic in body shape. But over time, dogs have uncoupled this function and an anatomical relationship, and part of that has been because this shift away from dogs being a more functional working animal through to being our companions, which is, again, still an incredibly important part of society. And particularly, I'm always hanging my head in shame in this because a lot of the problems that we see here do come from the UK and England, particularly during the Victorian age. We saw a real interest in breeding for different phenotypes and trying to get a real variety of dogs. And part of that came about because of the rise of the show rings, so people breeding dogs to show them for their conformation and to compete against one another to see who had the best looking dogs of different types. And this became a really big hobby, particularly for the wealthy classes in Victorian times. And rather than having these fluid types of dogs, so we had big dogs, small dogs, medium-sized dogs, we had very specific dogs that were put into genetic silos and were isolated from each other. We can see, for example, here, this is from a Birmingham dog show from 1874. I've put that there because I'm from Birmingham myself. If you're interested in this, there's a fantastic book on that about the invention of the modern dog, which is a history of this, because there's some really interesting human stories within that. And when we think about diversity in this new paradigm where dogs are genetically isolated from each other in breeds, we've got both expansion of diversity, where we're breeding for extremes, so very small or very large, very long muzzles, very short muzzles, but also we're seeing reduction in phenotypic diversity within those breeds. So these are a few photos from Crufts, which is the big annual dog show in Birmingham in the UK that is attended internationally by many thousands of dogs. And the dogs within these breeds become what we might think of as quite cookie cutter. They become very, very similar to one another. And that's because they are being tested against their breed standard, so how closely do they adhere to the perfect version of that breed. In the UK, the Kennel Club recognises well over 200 individual breeds now, and the FCI across the world now recognises over 350 different types. Each of these types has a breed standard, and I'm not expecting you to be able to see and read that text, but this is just to give an example that breed standards explain and explore the different elements of the dog's body from their head to their tail, and most of it is written in a very qualitative prose-like nature. So this is the pug, who I'll be talking about rather a lot over the next 10 minutes, but in the pug breed standard, we can see that their eyes should be dark, relatively large and round in shape. Okay, we can all understand that. Soft and solicitous in expression, very lustrous, and when excited, full of fire. So we can see this is quite flowery language. It's not particularly scientifically laid out. And although we might think of that as being quite funny, as the eyes of pugs are one of their big health issues and cause pain and suffering in these individuals, it's actually a really important point. We also only see very little data in there that is quantitative, so numbers, so the ideal weight range. And breed standards could be a lever for good if we dictate body shapes that allow dogs to live long, happy lives and fulfill their wants and needs, then great. But we unfortunately see breed standards very much as a force for negative animal welfare consequences. I realised after I put this one in that this was not the right place to talk about a Brussels Griffon, really, was it? But this is a really good example of encouraging exaggeration within a breed standard. So this has thankfully been changed, but only 10 years ago, the nose should be as short as possible in this breed. So we can see we're pushing towards the most extreme versions of some individual breeds. Exaggeration of these phenotypes or hypertypes is apparent across many different breeds, unfortunately. And breed standards aren't static. They can develop over time, and in some cases they've evolved, although I don't like using that word because biologically we're kind of going backwards. But in some breeds we can see that we're getting almost a caricature version of the original breed standard. So we've got two examples here, the Basset Hound from the 40s and then into the early 2000s. And we can see although they are recognisably a similar breed, we've got a much more exaggerated, kind of mimicked version of the original in 2008. We've got the more pendulous ears, we've got saggier skin, we've got a longer and lower conformation. The same for the bulldog. The bulldog originally, of course, used in, unfortunately, blood sport, so bull baiting. The same year that that was outlawed, we then ended up with a breed standard for the bulldog, who then became primarily a companion. And this loss of utility, this kind of uncoupling of form and function, has allowed selection for phenotypes, which would have hindered performance. We cannot imagine this little chap at the bottom, Frank, being able to fight a bull. We've got body shapes that no longer give dogs any function. Obviously, we don't want dogs that are there for blood sports, but we want dogs that can live long, happy lives. In Europe, we've now got an international collaborative for extreme conformation in dogs who have recently devised a definition for what they believe extreme conformation to be. So this is in dogs, and it's describing their physical appearance that has been altered by selective breeding so far away from that ancestral body form of the wolf, and affects dogs commonly to suffer from poor health and welfare or to reduce their quality and quantity of life. So we'll go through a little whistle-stop tour of some examples of this today. Unfortunately, the dogs, as a general species, as the domestic dog, has an enormous burden of genetic health problems. And although we're only talking today about the ones that are related to their body shape, it is very much worth knowing that there's almost 400 recognised inherited disorders in the dog. If we look to the right-hand side here, we can see about a fifth of these disorders are related to their body shape, the majority of which are a direct consequence of body shape. And this is where we reflect on, if we're deciding on their body shape, then why do we have 63 disorders that are directly linked to what we are impressing upon these individuals? So I'm just going to talk about a few examples. We'll talk mainly about flat-faced dogs, but just so I'm not completely going on one specific type. In the UK, this is a really big one right now. We have a huge surge in Dachshund ownership, and I know in continental Europe they're very popular too. The Dachshund, by definition, is unfortunately defective. We know that there is a specific gene that we are selecting for their short legs. They are an iconic breed, the sausage dog. But unfortunately, we know that 1 in 4 of these dogs in their lifetime will slip a disc in either their neck or their back and become, at best, paraplegic for a period and then recover. But for some dogs, they could have lifelong disability. We've got many, for example, online support sites for owners who now have dogs who are long-term doubly incontinent and are on wheels. And while these breeds are booming in popularity, this becomes more and more of a problem. Similarly, we've just published some work on the Shar-Pei, again an iconic Chinese breed. But again, we know there's a genetic mutation that causes their wrinkly skin, but also then causes many of the health issues in these breeds. We know the majority of their health issues are related to this skin phenotype. We're getting skin infections, painful ear infections, and also we're thinking about their eyes as being a really challenging part of their welfare. So we have puppies who have their eyes tacked open to try and keep their eyes open from a young age. So when they get older, they don't have to have surgery to then open their eyes because their eyelids are rubbing against their eyeballs. We can imagine how painful that would be. We've got these issues that are kind of defective by design. As I said, we'll talk mostly now about flat-faced breeds because they're kind of my bugbear. I've worked on them for the last 15 years as an issue, and unfortunately this issue seems to be getting worse rather than better, both in the UK, but it appears across Europe and indeed across the world. Now, you'll notice in the past couple of breeds, we had a couple of arrows. Unfortunately, for brachycephalic flat-faced breeds, we have arrows in every body part pretty much. We've got problems from head to tail, quite literally. The majority of these arrows, as we can see, are pointing towards the head and neck. And that's no surprise, really, when we think of how different their head and neck is from their ancestral species, going back to that extreme conformation definition. In the UK, we're really lucky to have what's called Vet Compass at the Royal Veterinary College. For the last 10 plus years, we've been collecting data from many thousands of vet practices to allow us to have estimating prevalence of disorders in different breeds. And these are just a few of the papers that we've published on the health burden of brachycephaly. We can see that these dogs have problems with their respiratory health, which we'll talk about with Claire later. Their eye health, they have challenges being able to reproduce naturally, so requiring caesarean sections in high levels, but also things due to heat stroke, obesity, eye problems and skin problems. These are just a handful of the issues that we see with these breeds, and we now have very strong evidence for this. This is my PhD over a decade ago now that linked together for the first time the relationship between how flat a dog's face is and their risk of having this obstructive airway disorder. And we can see that if we chose to have dogs that had a muzzle length that was longer than around 40% of their cranium, so we're thinking around the kind of level of a Staffordshire Bull Terrier here, that this disorder just wouldn't exist. But because we choose to breed dogs to the left-hand side of this graph, we instead have dogs that are almost inevitably born with these disorders. We've got a chance of over 90% of them being born with this because we're breeding them, effectively taking away a major organ, of taking away their respiratory tract. And we can see here through CTs the normal anatomy of a dog, and instead moving through into the extreme brachycephalic dog, where we're losing some of the really major areas, for example, behind the dog's nostrils, that are really key for thermoregulation. We're changing the shape of their brain, of their eye sockets. There's no surprise that we have all those arrows pointing towards their head and neck. And this isn't new information. Darwin knew about this. He was already talking about this in the 1800s, specifically calling out the bulldog and the pug, saying that why have we, as humans, found these genetic mutations, and instead of rejecting them and saying, wow, this is not something we want for our dogs, we've instead actually harnessed them, selected them, and proliferated them. We also know, again, going back to that definition of quality and quantity of life, that having a flat face reduces your lifespan quite dramatically. This is, again, some of our work from RVC. The average life expectancy of a French bulldog being just 4.5 years versus the crossbreed being almost 12 years. And again, for English bulldogs and pugs being only between 7 to 8 years. But we're still breeding them, buying them, owning them, importing them. We've got them moving all over the world, and they're very expensive very often. So this is across the world. We've got many of these flat-faced breeds are very high up in the registration statistics in their national kennel clubs. This graph on the left shows in Australia, dogs over the last 30 years are getting shorter and flatter-faced. And some of this is likely to be biological. When we think if this is cross-cutting across different countries, is there kind of biological effects, more human effects than cultural effects? And again, as we've alluded to, some of this could be because of their baby-like faces. We've now demonstrated that flat-faced dogs have large eyes and foreheads and rounded, more separated eyes that are more reminiscent of a human infant. And we've got really strong evolutionary drive to care for infants. And some of that might be spilling over into our dogs. We're more likely to describe these dogs as cute, and we know cuteness really sells. We've also got these social drivers. We know they are the celebrity go-to dog, particularly French bulldogs in the past few years. And it's kind of a status dog. When we talk about status dogs, at least in the UK, we often think about dogs that are being bred to look aggressive. But actually, when we think of status dogs as being dogs that bring fashionable kind of kudos to you as their owner, this kind of extrinsically motivated ownership. And we know from our own studies that dog owners of the dogs on the right are more likely to prioritise their looks over their health or their longevity. We also have some psychological mechanisms in terms of people normalising poor health in these breeds. One of my first studies found that nearly 60% of owners of flat-faced dogs, even when they report that their dog snorts and snores and has real trouble getting around and doing normal levels of exercise, they actually just think their dog is normal, and often they'll attribute that it's a breed characteristic rather than a health issue. We often see owners overestimating their dog's health. Many owners of flat-faced dogs think that their dog is in extremely good health and think that their dog is healthier than average, so they're somehow scapegoating other members of their breed. We also see this really worrying trend of commoditisation of poor health. So, for example, in a qualitative study that we conducted, we found things like laziness and this kind of perceived low exercise need to be a kind of attractive trait for these breeds rather than actually reflecting that they can't exercise because they're extremely unwell, being instead recommended for people who work, people who live in flats or don't want to walk their dog. And again, these are pathologies, these are not traits for marketing. And unfortunately, this problem seems to be here to stay. When we talk to owners of flat-faced breeds, the vast majority of them would choose to own their breed again in the future, particularly if they have strong bonds with them. And we've previously found that owners of flat-faced breeds are extremely emotionally bonded to them, probably why this is such an emotive issue. and particularly for female owners without children, that they seem to have very close, almost childlike relationships with them. We also had this worry that other extremes are rising in popularity. We've already mentioned that in the UK, particularly the miniature smooth-head dachshund is booming in popularity. They seem to be replacing the French bulldog as the go-to fashionable breed. So a real worry there. So when we think about the ethics and welfare of this, to wrap up, we've said that dogs as a species are mankind's greatest genetic experiment, but that does not mean greatest in the sense of this isn't a positive achievement for the dogs. We've done really quite remarkable things to their very plastic genotype, but unfortunately we've got dogs that now routinely require surgery to prevent, fix, or palliate the issues that we're breeding into them, or even require intervention to mate and give birth in the case of, for example, bulldogs and French bulldogs. We're ignoring, for example, their temperament, which is again very important for them to not have a high relinquishment risk, and instead prioritising their looks over their health and their well-being. And again, I think one of the depressing elements of this topic is that this isn't new. Back in 1999, we had Paul McGreevy in Sydney saying that some traits are best regarded as defects and are difficult to defend on animal welfare grounds. And that's why I always come back to, how can we defend specific body shapes of dogs on animal welfare grounds? Is it just for us, or is there anything in it for them? So to finish up, I think a key thing to think about going forwards when we're thinking about dog breeding is what we think of as innate health. So breeding dogs that are innately healthy. We need to fight this normalisation of poor health and just accepting that some breeds are just so much more unhealthy than others based on their body shape. We shouldn't have entire books based on individual breeds. I say that, I'm one of the editors of this second one. It's ridiculous that in this day and age we have to have entire textbooks dedicated to a handful of breeds because they're so sick. And instead we need to think about breeding dogs that have body shapes that allow them to live good, long, happy and healthy lives, and that we're not comparing them against just other members of their breed, but dogs as a species. Part of this is going to involve restoring functional anatomy, so bringing, for example, in brachycephalic dogs, that face back out so we can restore their airway, their brain, their eyes, and their skin health. Unfortunately, this is a mountain to climb, and this is one of the things where we need intelligent minds from many different fields to try and tackle this going forwards. We know the show ring, unfortunately, very much celebrates extremes. The dogs in the bottom row would not be winning any prizes in any dog show in any part of the world right now. Even though they're more moderate and more healthy, the extreme version is celebrated. We have marketers across the world still using extreme dogs in their marketing to sell all kinds of strange products. This really weird GIF here was for the soft drink J2O. I'm not entirely sure what this pug-human hybrid has to do with selling soft drinks, but clearly, we're exploiting animals who are inherently unwell. We're also, for example, seeing dogs in movies, and there is good evidence to show that dogs being shown in the media then become more popular as pets. So we really need to break that cycle. So I want to thank everybody for listening so nicely, and I'm more than happy to discuss any of this after. Thank you very much for having me here today.
And welcome to the organizers to invite me to present you the results of the working group of the Walloon Animal Welfare Council. But before going further, I need my slides. So it would be interesting for me to present what I have prepared. And first then, as you may have heard since the beginning of this meeting, at the origin, there was only one Animal Welfare Council, because the animal welfare was a topic that was regulated at the federal or national level. And in 2015, there was a reform of the state, and then the topic of animal welfare was transferred to the région, or the area, the region of Belgium, and there are 3 of them: the north part of the country, Brussels region, and the Wallonia, and then it means that instead of having one animal welfare council, we are very lucky to now work with 3 of them, and those councils are there to make people and the stakeholders and the society talk about animal welfare, to discuss about this, to reach agreements and to provide advices to the minister who has the animal welfare in his responsibilities, and also to help the regional service, executive service in its work. The councils are working with small groups, within small working groups, or they are working with councils meeting where the discussions are engaged to the, or within all the members. The opinions that are provided by the councils are based on science, on ethics, on the society point of view, and also on what is known about the international organization of one particular topic. We try to reach a consensus, and if there are any disagreements in the general statements that are suggested or written in an advice, they are presented in minority views that are joined or that are closed in the advice. The organization of the council, it's a group of people made of 16 up to 19 members. It depends on the region. And the mandate are 5 or 4 years longer. There is a steering committee who is responsible for the day-to-day organization and also to coordinate the working groups. And there are several stakeholders, representatives, and as you can see, there are people working with animals or protecting animals, either from the breeders, the traders, or veterinarians, or animal welfare organization, protectors, shelters, and representatives of the society also. And we receive the help of the administration, so we have state officers or scientific advisors who are helping us in our work. I don't ask you to read the full slide there, but I had to make choice within the different advices that have been given by each of the 3 councils. And if you are interested in all of them, I hope, or in one of the 3 of them, there are a website where you can reach in details those advices and the related documents. But you may notice that some topics are, have been treated by the 3 of the councils, and you may also notice that some regulations or decrees and project of legislation, regional legislation, has also been in our work. We have been invited to provide an advice, a position facing propositions of legislation. And you may also notice that the topics that we are working on are very diverse, not only related to companion animals, but also to farm animals or even wild animals. Now I have been invited to present you the results, very short presentation about the deleterious phenotypes in dogs. that was prepared by a working group in the Walloon Animal Welfare Council and then presented to that council and then accepted and transferred or given to the Minister Tellier that was just presenting us the topic before. And this group was made of 9 members. As you can see, they were not only vets, but also dog breeders, and the representatives were coming from the Federal Canine International Organization, 1 genetician, and also we had a governmental support or regional support. And then it was a topic that was taken by the council itself at first. Then we received a detailed request from the minister, and she wanted to, she asked the council to identify the deleterious phenotypes that were likely to harm animal welfare, and then to suggest solutions to guarantee the welfare of those animals. Then, as Rowena presented you, we needed to agree about the concepts and the definitions that we will use, and you see here that we agreed with what was presented before. So we were talking about either extreme breeding, but also about deleterious phenotypes, so genetic diseases. We worked during a bit more than 2 years, and it means 20 meetings, and we decided, we identified about 30 deleterious phenotypes, and we decided to work on those phenotypes rather than on breeds, because several phenotypic problems may be observed in one single breed, and in reverse, one single breed may be hidden by several genotypes problems. Then we decided to evaluate the impact of those problems on the animals, and we listed 21 criteria, and some of them are presented there. Is it a painful phenotype for the animal? Is this phenotype, does this phenotype arrive since birth? Is this phenotype responsible for a shortened life? Is it a treatment possible to alleviate the welfare problem of the animal, etc.? Then we rank ordered those criteria according to the responses that we provided for each phenotype, deleterious phenotype that we had identified. And then here are the 14 phenotypes that were identified. 12 of them undergo or went through the full process, and we decided to add the 2 additional ones on the right of the slide. So I know that the pictures are quite short, and for some of you, some problems are very obscure, but if you are interested, the details of the problems are available online. And as you may notice, the brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome is not the first one, even if it's one that is often observed. But according to our criteria, the osteosarcoma is a far more bad problem for animals. And this is why it was the first one, but it doesn't mean that brachycephalic obstructive syndrome is not important. This is why also I asked the organizers to spread within the audience some straw. So who are the people who have a straw within you? Some of you, you have one. So please try to please use it and breathe with that straw, within that straw. And then imagine that you have to run to catch your train. How hard is this? And it's the everyday life of those dogs. They are facing airway problems, and they are facing thermoregulatory problems, and they are not able to move, etc., etc. So it's a way for you to get awareness about their problems. So the recommendation was first to provide broad communication to all the people engaged in breeding dogs, not only the breeders themselves, but also vets, judges. We have seen how the pedigree can be interpreted in different ways, and also get the citizen informed. So thanks to Minister Tellier, who she showed you and us for the first time, the campaign that has been prepared to provide sensitization to the citizen about extreme breedings in dogs. You may have noticed that there is no clear breed identified in the video clip that you have seen. It was made on purpose because the idea is not to focus on one particular breed, but it's to focus on animal welfare at a broad sense. So don't produce long back dogs with a long back, or shortened legs, or smaller, or toy, etc. We were talking during the panel about large animal welfare earlier this afternoon. It has been discussed about training and information, and we also were aware that the training of the breeders, but all the people engaged in producing those dogs was of importance. And we need more information, so more results about research related to genetic problems and the appropriate breeding of dogs. And also, we need to be able to trace, to follow the animals from the parents to the progeny, the descendants, the young that are produced. So a DNA bank, a recording, the registration of the animals is also of importance. And we have to also forget the common use and to teach extreme breeding also into communication universities or marketing universities, because it's common use of those breeds, but those breeds are not animals, does not show us animals with appropriate welfare. So even if it's funny, even if a human thinks they carry the appropriate message for the animal point of view, it's not an appropriate message. And we also suggest, and we were convinced that it was interesting or important to identify, to provide each dog or each potential breeder with authorization or an agreement for reproduction or for breeding. And this is not an easy way to, to implement, but we think that it was more appropriate to select the animals to be able to breed than to withdraw or to ban some breeds from the whole panel or batch of breeds that are available. I am ready to discuss with you about your personal ideas or actions that you might have already implemented, and if you have any positive results, I am also interested to discuss with you. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a nice stay here.
everyone, and thank you for still being here to discuss this particular topic. We will discuss about artificial intelligence today, but not too technical because it can get very difficult for a topic. So I will need the slides to go on. I'm a police inspector. I'm representing the police called Zone South, so it's the south of Brussels. It's one of the 6 zones in Brussels. My journey has led me to establish the animal unit in my zone in 2019 and to take charge of the Walloon project. So it's a work group led by my police zone. This work group connects various competent administrations to combat and investigate offenses related to animal welfare. In addition to my policing role, I extend my commitment to this cause by serving as a trainer on animal law and providing training for police academies. Moreover, I'm honored to be the president and co-founder of BNASBL. This is an association that is dedicated to offering environmental and animal law training for professionals. Okay, so let's delve into the essence of today's discourse. I've been asked to shed light on the current situation within law enforcement concerning illegal advertisements on the internet. We are now witnessing a surge in these adverts. Unfortunately, these ads encourage compulsive pet acquisition. This can obviously have an impact on their welfare. I can already tell you something. The people involved in the shelters and field observations are seeing one thing. The majority of animals arriving at the shelters have been sold on the internet, apparently illegally, and this impulse purchase does not allow all the animals' needs to be taken into consideration before acquisition. It will be interesting to collect this data on the origin of the dogs that come to the shelters, maybe for our next study. What's the impact of these compulsive purchases? We are currently in a complex situation. It's very difficult for us as police officers and for all the other administrations to find places in shelters. They are saturated. The repercussion of these impulsive purchases are severe, leading to frequent changes in a pet's family and, regrettably, unsuitable living conditions. Despite the challenges, the collective dedication on animal welfare stakeholders, shelters, and associations often paves the way for solutions, and I thank them for it. Beyond the strain on shelters and unsuitable living conditions, the risk of online scams adds another layer of complexity. False tales of foreign animals needing repatriation or orphaned puppies due to the demise of their owners, this aspect too demands our attention. There is a risk for the population of being scammed. Our nation holds the distinction of being the first in Europe to legislate specifically on social media advertisements, thanks to Wallonia. A study conducted in 2017 for the PTI committee revealed that over 60% of animal purchases in Europe occur through online platforms. On a single day in January 2017, more than 6,000 ads were catalogued on the most frequent sites in Belgium, so it's in one day. So what does the law say now? As already said, Belgium has 3 different legislation due to the regionalization of animal welfare laws. Today, we center discussion on Brussels regulations while briefly touching upon the legislations in the other 2 regions. In Brussels, the law for animal protection and welfare applies, supplemented by additional rules. For the moment, advertising is permitted only for animals listed in the positive list. Those are the species that can be owned without authorization, like cats and dogs. A positive list exists for mammals and reptiles. For other animals not on this list, such as birds or frogs, advertising is also allowed, but subject to specific conditions. First condition on where it happens. Advertising for listed animals is restricted to specialized sites, with exceptions for accredited shelters and breeders. The content of any permitted advertisement must include the advertiser's name, contact and postal address, approval number, species, identification, sterilization status, and price. Moreover, all advertisements must contain a notice. This notice is saying that an animal is not an object, carries responsibilities, and also saying that neglect or abandonment is an offense. But what is a specialized website? This is specialized when it focuses exclusively on the commercialization of animals, excluding commonly known platforms as marketplace, by example. You have also other examples on the slides. And now, in the other regions, in Wallonia, advertising on social media is expressly prohibited, except within closed groups and exclusively for adoptions or sales by accredited companies. In Flanders, legislation aligns with Brussels but lacks specific content requirements. In the future now, looking ahead, Brussels and Flanders are on the verge of voting their new codes. In Brussels, regulations will be consolidated for clarity, with social media being a specific target. An interesting measure is the potential imposition of sanctions on site administrators and the introduction of mystery shopping technique. So, in conclusion, a vast majority of advertisements on social media or sales sites are illegal. Identifying and addressing this illicit content, as per the Digital Service Act, poses multiple challenges. It requires a lot of things: identifying, analyzing, identifying the ads responsible party, notifying the site administrator, ensuring the removal of illicit content, issuing fines to the ads responsible. All this obviously takes a lot of time and resources. If all the ads have to be analyzed one by one, it's impossible. That's why, for the time being, these offenses are only prosecuted on complaint or when they are linked to other cases. Moving beyond the legal aspect, I want to draw your attention to different intentions behind the same offense as perceived by individuals. There are two distinct types of offenses characterized by how people perceive animals. This is the perception here of the animal that's important. In the first scenario, animals are seen as companions, providing emotional comfort and potentially filling a void. These individuals may not seek to profit from the sale. Their intention is, at worst, to recoup their expenses. Their actions stem from a lack of information or personal conviction. On the other hand, there are those who view animals purely as material goods, commodities to be exploited for profit. They consciously employ illegal means to maximize gains, ranging from fraudulent trade practices to involvement in large-scale trafficking operations. This is the traffic. We have the difference between the people giving an animal on the internet and the traffickers. It's legally the same offenses, but these different intentions needs a differentiated approach for an effective response. To combat the illicit commercialization of online animal commercializing, addressing the factors that enable or encourage such offenses is crucial. For the first scenario, effective communication and raising awareness about existing regulation is essential. Initiating positive change through information is more suitable at this stage, avoiding a purely punitive approach that may breed public mistrust the rule. Concerning trafficking, a different response is warranted. In most cases, this is a rational choice influenced by a risk-benefit analysis. Animal trafficking, being less regulated than drug trafficking, is equally lucrative. Acting on this calculus, making environmental offenses less interesting becomes imperative. Animal trafficking is linked to other offenses, such as money laundering, criminal conspiracy, fraud, illegal trading. No single authority has these powers and knowledge, so it's vital to work together to combat this type of trafficking. However, the focus should not be on perpetrators, but also on the audience targeted by these ads. Without demand, there is no supply. Proactive and visible control measures will discourage potential buyers, as the majority prefers not to associate with illegal sales. A simple principle: no buyers, no suppliers. I'm not telling about all the suppliers, but only the illegal suppliers and the traffickers. Here is where it gets complicated. The majority of these offenses occurs online, on sales platforms or social networks. Welcome to the digital revolution, as known as digital era. What's the principle of our times? Ubiquity. We can now be everywhere, at all times, with anyone we want. Physical interactions have given way to digital ones, granting human access to a new virtual society. While this offers exciting new possibilities, such knowledge and culture, it also raises questions about the practical application of legal rules in the digital space. Here comes the artificial intelligence. Could it replace the traditional security cameras in this new virtual reality? From a practical standpoint, artificial intelligence seems to be the only solution capable of managing the vast amount of data involved in illegal advertisements. This obviously does not replace the human intervention, but it does make it possible to digitize the search of offenses and improve efficiency. From an ethical point of view, like any new research technique, it can raise a number of questions. Europe seems to have realized this as it's preparing to vote on a text to regulate the use of artificial intelligence. This regulation should take into account the risk that the tools could represent for the security or the fundamental rights. In conclusion, there should be broader regulation on the marketing of animals. The proposed text on the traceability of dogs and cats in Europe is a great step. It shows that society is increasingly interested in animals' welfare. As a field agent, I want to be able to continue to improve the way we deal with all offenses relating to animal welfare and the environment. To be effective, we need to work in partnership. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those involved in animal legislation, all the inspection services, and all our partners in associations without whom we could do nothing. I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation, and I would also like to thank you all for your involvement.
They left all the work for me, that is how can we use AI to detect these illegal animal sales. Well, this is a project that we did 2 years ago as one of the pilot projects of the FARI Institute. This institute was a new institute created to do AI for the common good. That means how can we use AI for do also good things, to help the citizens and the administrations in problems such as the one that we have today. The 4 first pilot projects were these 4 that we have on the screen, related to employment, AI strategy for the Brussels region, simplification of the administration, which is also a very common problem, and the one that we have today, that is animal welfare and AI. So I was in charge of developing this one, and this was 2022. This is important to say the year, because when you work on AI, 2 years is very, very far ago, okay? So what did we do? Well, they asked, as Julien introduced, how can AI help with this problem? So we can detail how was this problem. First of all, the ads are uploaded every day. As he already introduced, we had a ton of ads that are introduced every day, so we need a lot of people if we want to control them. So that's where AI can help. Then these ads actually might stay only there for 1 hour. So if the policeman that is in charge of finding that AI is not there or cannot find it at that moment, 1 hour might be too late. Then also we need to validate multiple data sources. That means, as he already proposed, there are legal sellers, okay? So you can say that you have this license number, but you need to go there to some other table and check that this is actually the legal seller that he's saying that he is. So you need to also be able to validate multiple data sources at the same time. And also you need to be able to identify conflicts that you cannot do with a simple ad. If you look at one simple advertisement, it might look legal, but it might not be legal. You have to go there and see, oh, there's actually another user using the same license number. But you cannot see that only checking one announcement. So this is all the things that AI we realized at the beginning that could help with. So this was mainly our project. The first part was monitor. How can we get the ads that were online on real time? Then we need to extract all the data from these ads. We need to analyze them. That means taking the law that was just presented compared to the announcement and say, is this legal or not? And that will be the classification. And then it was also interesting to start storing all this data, because on the long term, we would be able to predict or to detect some anomalies in the data that might tell us something about what's going on. If we detect that there's a lot of announcements in one specific region, one specific day, that might be weird. So that might lead us to something else. So that was the project, and now I will briefly say how did we do this. So that was the pile of technology that we had. Mainly, we have web scraping, natural language processing, image recognition, and data analysis. I will go briefly through each one of these things, and it will be very easy. So web scraping means going to any of these websites and try to take all the data from the website. That is going from this HTML code to real data that we can use. In this pilot project, we tried these 4 different websites that were considered as these websites where you cannot sell unless you have a license number. Then we can apply these natural language processing techniques. That means how can then extract the information from all the data that we got. This means how can we take the announcement that we have there and start identifying the fields that we need according to the law. Is there the license? What is the animal? Is there a phone number? And see if we have all the fields, that might be legal. If we don't have them, that might not be legal. And here we start detecting some funny stuff, because actually you can start adding your license number, otherwise the website will not allow you to sell the animal. But here we can start detecting this funny license number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? That, according to the website restriction, could be legal because it follows the rule, but it's probably that is not a real license number. And there were some other people actually using 10000. That was the other option. Okay? So we can more or less see that probably all these announcements were illegal. Then we can also use image recognition after that. That is, okay, we have a photo of the animal, and we want to detect whether this is a cat or is a dog. And you might think that this is actually not useful at all for this problem, but what we detected is that some websites will enforce some control on the animal category. So if you are to sell an animal, they will force you to fill all these fields according to the law. But if you want to sell a book, you can just sell it. So they will go to the book category and sell the animal there. So you avoid all the control from the website. So if we are able to detect the animal just from the photo, then we can also detect all these illegal animal sales. And last, the data analysis. If we start storing all this data, we can then start with this prediction. And these are all the tools that we could use when implementing this kind of project. As an image, we have this. As everyone talked today, we have 3 different regions with different legislations. These are the ads that we tracked. And you can see the difference between Flanders and Walloon legislations. And because in Walloon it's way more restricted to sell animals online, so you can see how there are way less animals in our pilot project. So, some numbers. We analyzed more than 30,000 ads. This means we were developing this prototype, we were testing it, and during all the test phase, we analyzed these 30,000. That means that we were getting like 200 new ads per day in the websites that we were targeting. And that adds to a total of around 8 million euros. And bad news, 100% of them were illegal somehow. Because, as Julien said before, there was this legal mention that it was mandatory to put on all these animals sales, and this was not in any of these sales. So we could say that 100% of them were illegal. So here are some limitations and open questions of things we knew or we kind of learned through the process. One of them is obvious, I think, is we have geographic limitations for online advertisement. If we have different laws, you can buy something here in Brussels that is sold somewhere else. So which law are we going to apply? How can we deal with this kind of problem? The second one is the precision in this law. As you can imagine, if you have a friend that is a lawyer, I do. And so yeah, I have friends, that's great. So the idea is sometimes the law are not very precise. That's why we have lawyers, to interpret them. So that's something that we need to teach to AI as well. So if you want to tell the AI what is legal and what is illegal, you have to be very precise with that. And then one of the open questions that was coming on the last meeting was, how can we use this tool? Is this for prevention? Is this for reaction? If we detect something illegal, should we just send an email? Should we send the police? Or should we just maybe prevent them and say, hey, this is not legal, or talk with the website? So that was the pilot project, and that was some of the questions that were raised by this project. And these are some of the pre-conclusions, I would say. That is, in this pilot project, I think we proved how AI could help. And also, we show some of the limitations and things that we need to actually take into account if we want to develop this project for real. And then I want to leave with some actually news, because new AI techniques, as you might know, are available right now. That's why I'm saying that 2 years is way too far. Because now, 2 years later, if I were to do this project, I will do it completely different, probably. And I want to leave you with these opportunities that we have right now. So in 2024, right now, we have these large language models that we all know, like ChatGPT, Llama, and all these models, that are actually very powerful for doing a lot of things. But also, they are very powerful in natural language processing techniques. That means that a lot of the things that we could do, now we can do them way better. So that means that I would do this very differently. And I can show you how, with just some lines, I could do more or less the same project that I did in 1 year. So I took the same announcement that I showed before, and I just gave it to one of these large language models, and I told them, hey, can you get me all this data? And I just got all this data, so we can just do it in a more general way. And then if we talk about actually multimodal languages, that means we can also use image recognition in a way better way than before. It's not cat or dog. This is telling us which race is this dog, that actually not even me knew. And it's giving us a lot of information that might be useful. So this is the tool. We have to give it shape for our purpose, but this can be very powerful if we use it in a good way. We can detect the race, and we can do a lot of things that we could not do 2 years ago. So I think that's somehow good news that I want to leave. And that would be all. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness, Prince Laurent of Belgium. Thank you for attending. Esteemed friends, friends of animals, and therefore our friends, yeah, you don't have to watch. No slides for me, just watch my words. What a relief, the last politician speaking. But I think this meeting makes sense. I think throughout today, we all felt that we should be here, we should do this. European cooperation in the field of animal welfare is so obvious that it is downright astonishing that it wasn't done before. There are so many challenges that demand a European approach. More European cooperation would improve the lives of countless animals. Think about the animals in international livestock transports. Think of all animals traded across the borders of our member states. Think of the animals in all laboratories, in all universities in the European Union. But dear Europe and dear European Union, if you don't do it for the animals, do it for yourself. Because the European project needs animal welfare as much as animal welfare needs Europe. The European Union still needs to win the hearts and minds of all Europeans. European cooperation, you know, began at 1951 as the European Coal and Steel Community. And in the minds of many Europeans, it has always remained that way. I mean that we still primarily associate European cooperation with trade interests, with geopolitics and calculations in Excel spreadsheets. And for many Europeans, the EU seems like an abstract entity, a bureaucracy that doesn't really touch or inspire ordinary citizens, and when it does, not always in a positive way. So I think the European Union can show a more humane face by embracing animal welfare. It can demonstrate to all Europeans that Europe is not only there for businesses and interests, but also for the most vulnerable. And if you don't believe us, just look at Flanders, look at the two other regions in Belgium, because we were only responsible for animal welfare for the past 10 years. And before that, it was the jurisdiction of the federal Belgian state. It was somehow a bit a neglected, half-forgotten responsibility. And only in 2004, the responsibility was transferred to Flanders and to the two other regions. And we took hold of it and developed it into a genuine policy domain with decisive measures. I could talk about it all day, but what have we done? We've increased the budget by more than tenfold. We have more than tripled the number of staff members. We have implemented strict penalties for animal abuses, including imprisonment. We said goodbye to several outdated practices, like, for example, the slaughter without stunning. The day I proposed it, they declared me totally crazy, and it took us 2 years. But in the end, it was voted in our Flemish Parliament without any vote against it. We banned breeding fur animals just for their pelts. We banned using animals as fairground attractions. But the most important thing is that we managed to mobilize the entire society, including police and our judiciary system. And citizens respond in a positive way. And they all know that policies are implemented, and, for example, they now report incidents of animal cruelty massively, because they know, they are confident that action will be taken. And this also has been beneficial for the Flemish political level. And even for me, I gain support by it. And that's what I wish for the European Union as well. Gain support through animal welfare. If you want to touch people's hearts, go for animal welfare. And what should the European Union concretely do regarding animal welfare? Lots of things, I think. Just step one, we need a commissioner for animal welfare in the next commission, in the upcoming commission. It's no longer justifiable that there are commissioners for lots of things. There are commissioners for equality, for promoting our European way of life. We've got a European commissioner for that. We've got a European commissioner for interinstitutional relations and foresight, yet no commissioner for animal welfare. It should be more than just the title. Having a separate commissioner, independent from, for example, agriculture. It implies a fully fledged and completely independent EU administration for animals, ministerial councils, specifically and solely focused on animal welfare, and regular debate in the European Parliament on animal welfare. Second step, the Commissioner must work towards ambitious EU regulations. Regulations on, for example, we saw that today, that's good work, long distance, regulations on long distance animal transports, regulations on the trade of pets, regulations on identification, registration, but also move on towards the introduction of a label showing consumers which products make extra efforts for animal welfare. And step 3, we need to engage in a European debate for or about outdated practices. For example, I think we have to strive for a fur-free Europe. I think we have to strive for a ban on non-stun slaughter. And regarding the end of the cage age, it can be done. It can be done because we've got a new code on animal welfare, and I think it's in about 2 months, the Parliament in Flanders will be voting on that, including a phasing out of cages for chickens. So, if we can, Europe can. Yes, we can. And yes, we can take the 4th step as well, tackling EU obstacles, because we have to acknowledge as well that today the EU sometimes stands in front of animal welfare. For example, today you can only produce liver of geese and ducks and sell it as foie gras when it reaches a weight of 300 or 400 grams. And farmers can only reach that weight through force feeding, resulting in sick livers of sick animals. So we should ban that, stop with those regulations. And why is it that a member state can't go further in limiting animal testing, no further than EU legislation says? So why is that? I think many Europeans have great compassion for animals, so it's time for the EU to reflect this. European democracy must reflect the aspirations of the Europeans. And it's an opportunity for the European Union itself. So, to sum it all up, ladies and gentlemen, friends of animals, what is good European politics? 2 things, maybe. Good politics is doing something for the animals. We all acknowledge that. But good politics is also knowing when people are ready for some food and drinks. I believe this time has come. And because we love all animals and also party animals, we have something very special for you. And in the hope that you will stick around, building connections, forging alliances for more animal welfare within the European Union. We have a renowned Flemish chef, Seppe Nobels, he's a big name in Flanders. He's a wizard in the kitchen, he's a champion of good causes, and I'm pleased to invite him to tell you more about tonight's meal, and it will not surprise you that everything on the menu is animal friendly, so enjoy your meal. Let this be the beginning of way much more. This is the start. This is in fact the first European summit regarding animal welfare. It won't be the last. Europe has to become the international frontrunner on animal welfare. And I have a dream, I share with you a dream that one day we won't only say, I love animals, I love Europe, but we'll be saying and stating, I love Europe because I love animals, I love animals because I love Europe. I hope that's a dream we can realize together. Thank you very much.